Hey everyone, Migs here, and happy Halloween to you all. Now, during this time of the year, a lot of people tend to watch a lot of horror movies, and they go with some of the classics, such as like The Exorcist or The Evil Dead. And today, I decided not only would I share with you one of the most terrifying movies of all time, but it is actually the very first movie I watched as a child that scared the living hell out of me. Now, as I said, some of you might be thinking of the classics. No, I'm not talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. I mean, yeah, you clicked on this video, so you know what I'm talking about here. I am talking about Disney's 1985 classic, Return to Oz.
This summer, Walt Disney Pictures presents a motion picture fantasy adventure beyond your fondest imagination. You'll be transported miraculously back to the enchanted land of Oz, that magical kingdom beloved by young and old for generations.
It's just a yellow brick.
No, Bellina, you don't understand. This was the yellow brick road.
Why don't we just fly back to Kansas?
Return to Oz.
Return to Oz was directed by Walter Murch and stars a very young Fairuza Balk in her very first role. She would then, of course, take on roles in movies such as The Craft and The Waterboy. Now, as for Return to Oz, many of you, if not all of you, are pretty unfamiliar with this movie, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, what can be so scary about another tale in the colorful and whimsical land of Oz? Well, allow me to explain to you about this movie and how this movie traumatized me when I was young. So Return to Oz takes place pretty much immediately after the very first movie, where Dorothy returns to Kansas from her acid trip in Oz, and she gets admitted to a psychiatric hospital where, to cure Dorothy's delusions, they use electric shock therapy. I'm not even kidding, this is what happens in the movies, and Dorothy actually ends up escaping the hospital in the middle of a really bad storm, and as she's getting away, she falls into a river, and you guessed it, she gets whisked back into Oz. So once the storm clears and Dorothy finally wakes up, not only does she realize that she is in Oz, but there's something that's definitely off about this place. I mean, for one, there's no welcoming committee. I mean, there's no munchkins or witches to greet her, and her friends, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion, are nowhere to be found, and also the yellow brick road is left in ruins. So of course, Dorothy, being the savior of Oz, she tries to figure out what exactly is going on. And as she reaches the Emerald City, she finds out that everyone has been turned to stone. Now, we're still in the beginning parts of this whole movie here, and one would say that this is pretty innocent at first, and Dorothy does actually end up making some new friends, such as Bellina the Chicken, TikTok, a wind-up guard of the Royal Army of Oz. Later down the movie, we meet a Jack Pumpkinhead, who oddly reminds me so much of Jack Skellington, and also a creature that looks like it wants to be taken out of its misery, the Gump. What the fuck? There are also new villains that are introduced in this film, such as the Wheelers, which are basically a more terrifying version of the Flying Monkeys. They are humanoid creatures with wheels for hands and feet, and they make the most terrible noise in the world as they come close to you. And they are ruled by Princess Mombi, which is yet another witch in the vast land of Oz. And once we meet Princess Mombi, that is when the total nightmare of the film is finally unleashed. So once Dorothy meets Princess Mombi, she's introduced as a pretty fair and somewhat elegant princess, and well, that shroud is taken off pretty damn quickly when Princess Mombi shows off her collection of heads to Dorothy, also confessing to Dorothy that, yeah, your head's about right. I'll be taking that too. But not only does Princess Mombi confess that, but she also confesses that the reason of why everything is going wrong in Oz is because of someone called the Gnome King. More on that later. But right now, Princess Mombi holds Dorothy captive, where she meets Jack Pumpkinhead, and they try to plan an escape, and where Dorothy must steal a key from Mombi, and that leads to powder of life, and hopefully that powder of life can cure all of the Emerald City. I mean, it's a small can of powder. I mean, I don't know how that can actually cure the whole entire city, but hey, a plan is a plan here. But as they go on with this plan, what follows is by far the scariest scene I'd ever seen when I was a child. My God. It's the scariest head of them all. God, how is this a children's... Oh my God!
Dooorothy Gaaaaaleee.
Oh my... That will... Oh my gosh. This will never not be scary. Everything about this. It's nightmare fuel. Look at that! Now Dorothy and her friends end up escaping Mombi's castle with the things of now a flying Gump, and the group of heroes make their way to the Gnome King's mountain. Now, just because we've escaped Mombi doesn't exactly mean that we've left all the scary stuff behind. Granted, Mombi is the scariest character in this movie, the Gnome King does have his fair share of, well, creepy. And when the Dorothy and the friends meet the Gnome King, we find out that he takes shape from the rock formations of the mountain, and also gives Dorothy and her friends a bit of a challenge, what he explains to be a pretty fair challenge. The challenge being that each of her friends must choose one item from his collection. If they choose an item that ends up being one of their friends, they can then leave the Gnome King's palace. And, well, let's just say, long story short, each of the friends fail and get turned into an inanimate object. And every single time that happens, it appears that the Gnome King becomes more powerful. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. I mean, he gets to look more human-like, so I would think that he's becoming more powerful. I don't know, you guys. Also, Dorothy learns that the Gnome King has the ruby slippers. I don't know how that was possible, but he has it and makes him, I guess, the most powerful being in Oz. So it's now Dorothy's turn. And, of course, her being Dorothy, she picks right, and she also learns that the correct ornaments to pick are the color green, or I guess emerald. The Gnome King is very much aware that she has wised up and knows how to solve this challenge, and is very, very furious. He immediately stops the challenge, and just when the Gnome King, a very giant and ferocious Gnome King now, is about to eat Jack Pumpkinhead, Billina hatches an egg that the Gnome King ingests, and it kills him. An egg. Not joking. Again, this is all happening in the movie. Because apparently eggs are poison to the gnomes. And so as the Gnome King is dying and all the other gnomes are just in complete dismay, Dorothy takes the ruby slippers and wishes that everything in Oz is turned back to normal. Now, everything is finally set right once again in Oz, and now Dorothy wishes to return back home, which she does, and back to the mental institution. I'm just kidding, you guys. She goes back home where she would live the rest of her days as a crazy person. Now, I, of course, was very curious as to how accurate this movie is to the books. I mean, there are, I guess, a total of 13 books in the whole story of Oz. And apparently, Return to Oz is considered the most faithful to the second and third Oz books, The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz, which were all written by the original author, L. Frank Baum. L. Frank Baum went on to write 13 books total that were set in the land of Oz. Now, knowing how faithful Return to Oz is to the second and third books, Baum would continue on with this dark aesthetic to his stories, scaring children such as myself for years to come. It really makes you think, you know, like with the very classic original Wizard of Oz, and even I'd say the Broadway musical Wicked. Those are so lighthearted, but also so far and beyond from the original content, and that Return to Oz is really the most accurate depiction. It's insane. And you come to realize that the tales from the magical land of Oz are very dark and scary. So there you guys have it. That is Return to Oz. I am so happy that I got a chance, an opportunity to finally talk to you guys about this movie. It's a very classic movie that I will always forever remember. I don't know if I'd ever rewatch it. I mean, maybe I would, just to like introduce it to someone who hasn't seen it. This is definitely a movie to introduce to people. I would even go as far as saying, you know, introduce this to younger minds, younger children, just to keep the tradition going. I mean, in retrospect, you know, watching this as an adult, you're like, oh yeah, that's pretty damn dark. It's pretty damn scary. But when you think about it, watching it as a child, yeah, you begin to understand, like, oh yeah, this is definitely how you set, you know, that kind of introduction to horror to a young child. So there you guys have it. Let me know what you thought of Return to Oz. Is this a film that you have seen yourself? When did you watch this film? Did you watch it in the 80s? Are you yourself an 80s baby? Or did you watch this more recently? Or will you never ever touch this with a 10-foot pole? Let me know in the comments down below. But in the meantime, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please do not forget to smash that like. And if you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing, as well as ring the bell so that you're notified for the next video. And that's going to be it for today. I want to thank you so much again for watching. My name is MigsXL, and happy Halloween.